Why does America spend more money on its military than the next 10 countries combined? That's not just a shocking fact. It's a question that tells a much bigger story. Every year, the United States pours hundreds of billions of dollars into defense, building weapons, maintaining bases, and funding operations across the globe. But why is the spending so high? Is it really about safety, or is there something deeper driving these numbers? Stay with me, because by the end of this video, you'll understand the history, the politics, and the money machine behind America's endless war budget. And I'll share a surprising insight that might change the way you see military spending forever. To understand why the U.S. spends so much on war today, we need to rewind the clock. This isn't just a modern problem. America's defense spending habit was built over decades, layer by layer, through wars, fear, and power struggles. Let's start with World War II. Back then, the United States wasn't the superpower we know today. But when war broke out, America transformed almost overnight. Factories shifted from making cars and refrigerators to building tanks, planes, and weapons. Millions of jobs were created. The economy surged because of war production, and for the first time, the U.S. became a global military leader. When the war ended, America wasn't just victorious. It was powerful, with an army and navy that could reach anywhere in the world. Most countries cut back their militaries after the war. America didn't. Why? Because almost immediately, the Cold War began. The United States and the Soviet Union were locked in a tense standoff. Each side raced to build more weapons, more bombs, and more military technology than the other. Nuclear weapons were no longer just a concept. They were a threat hanging over every head. For decades, this arms race shaped U.S. policy. The government spent heavily to stay ahead. Military bases popped up across the globe. Aircraft carriers patrolled oceans. Intelligence agencies grew larger, and space exploration itself was born out of military competition. By the time the Cold War ended in 1991, the U.S. had already established itself as the world's dominant military power. The idea of scaling back defense spending didn't seem realistic anymore. America's military machine had become a permanent part of the economy, politics, and culture. Then came the War on Terror. After the attacks on September 11, 2001, defense budgets exploded again. The U.S. invaded Afghanistan, then Iraq, spending trillions over the next 2 decades. This era cemented America's role as a country that fights wars overseas rather than at home. Military contracts grew even larger. Surveillance systems expanded. Technology companies joined defense giants in shaping the battlefield. Now, in the 21st century, America spends more on its military than at any time in history, even though it's not officially at war in the traditional sense. Why? Because over the years, a cycle was created. Wars and threats justified spending. Spending created industries and jobs. Those industries then influence politics to keep the spending going. When you hear today's numbers, over $800 billion a year, it's easy to think this is just a choice made by politicians. But the truth is, it's decades of history, fear, and strategy stacked on top of each other. It's not just about protecting borders. It's about maintaining power, influence, and dominance. By knowing this context, you can see why cutting the defense budget is nearly impossible. The U.S. military isn't just a department of government. It's a deeply rooted system. And that's only the beginning of this story. Now that we've seen how America's military spending became a habit, let's talk about the numbers. And they're staggering. The United States spends more on its military than any other country in the world. In fact, it spends more than the next 10 countries combined. That includes China, Russia, India, and some of America's closest allies. Together, they don't even come close to matching what the U.S. pours into defense every year. In 2024, the U.S. defense budget was over $800 billion. To put that in perspective, if you spent $1 million every single day, it would take more than 2,000 years to reach that number. And this isn't a one-time expense. It's a yearly budget that often grows no matter who is in power. So where does all this money go? A huge portion funds the Department of Defense, which pays for everything from salaries to advanced weapons programs. Billions are spent on fighter jets, aircraft carriers, nuclear weapons, and technology research. The U.S. also maintains hundreds of military bases in over 70 countries. Keeping those bases operational costs billions more each year. But here's the shocking part. While most Americans see defense spending as something distant, money going to tanks or missiles, it's also deeply tied to everyday life. Defense contractors are spread across almost every state. That means billions of dollars from the Pentagon flow into communities all over the country. Jobs are tied to this spending, making it politically difficult for leaders to cut the budget, even if they wanted to. Compare this to other government spending. In 2024, defense took up nearly half of all discretionary federal spending. That's the money Congress can directly control each year. Programs like education, infrastructure, and housing receive a fraction of what's spent on the military. For example, the entire budget for education is less than a quarter of what the Pentagon receives. This means that, year after year, America chooses to prioritize defense above almost everything else. What's more, the U.S. spends far more than its allies. NATO recommends member countries spend 2% of their GDP on defense. The U.S. spends over 3.5. That might not sound like much, but on a $28 trillion economy, the difference is massive. This level of spending has made the U.S. military the most advanced and powerful force in history. But it also creates a cycle that's hard to escape. Once a budget reaches this size, it builds its own momentum. Companies depend on contracts. Politicians depend on those companies for campaign donations. And military leaders push for more resources to stay ahead of rising global threats. So when you hear someone ask, why can't America just cut back? The answer isn't simple. Defense spending is not just a number. It's an entire ecosystem. And that ecosystem is about to make more sense when we explore why America spends this much. To understand why the U.S. spends so much on its military, we need to look deeper than the numbers. The reasons are layered. History, politics, economics, and global influence are all tangled together. This isn't just about keeping the country safe. It's about power, profit, and perception. Let's break it down. First, the military-industrial complex. This term was made famous by President Dwight D. Eisenhower in the 1960s. He warned that a powerful connection between defense contractors, the government, and the military would grow stronger over time. And he was right. Today, massive companies like Lockheed Martin, Boeing, and Raytheon make billions of dollars every year through government contracts. These companies design planes, ships, missiles, and high-tech weapons. Their success depends on constant defense spending. They also spend millions lobbying politicians to make sure that funding never dries up. It's a cycle. The government pays these companies, they create jobs, and those jobs make politicians support more spending. Second, America's global presence. The U.S. isn't just a country. It's a global power with interests all over the world. Maintaining hundreds of overseas military bases, fleets of ships, and advanced aircraft isn't cheap. From Europe to Asia, the U.S. positions itself as a protector of allies and a deterrent to enemies. This costs billions, but it also gives America influence. The presence of U.S. troops in dozens of countries sends a message. America is watching, and it's ready to act. Third, politics at home. Defense spending creates jobs in nearly every state. If a weapons factory employs thousands of people in one state, politicians from that state will fight hard to keep defense budgets high. Cutting spending could mean job losses, which is a political risk few leaders want to take. This makes defense one of the few issues that gets bipartisan support in Congress. Fourth, constant global threats. The U.S. has been involved in conflicts for most of its modern history. Even when wars end, tensions rise somewhere else. Terrorism, rival powers like China and Russia, and emerging cyber threats keep military spending high. Leaders argue that the U.S. must stay ahead of these threats, and that requires funding. Put these reasons together, and you see why the defense budget keeps growing. It's not just about national security, It's about maintaining global dominance, keeping the defense industry alive, and avoiding political fallout. Over time, this spending has become part of America's identity. It signals strength, but it also creates dependence. This is why even small cuts spark controversy. Defense spending is locked into a cycle where every dollar spent today becomes a reason to spend more tomorrow. Next, let's look at who truly benefits from this massive flow of money. And it's not always the people you'd expect. When you look at America's massive defense budget, one question naturally comes to mind. Who actually benefits from all this spending? On the surface, it might seem like this money is simply protecting the country. But the truth is, it creates winners, and they're not always the people paying the taxes. Defense contractors are at the top of the list. Companies like Lockheed Martin, Northrop Grumman, Boeing, and Raytheon earn billions every year through military contracts. These aren't small deals. They're often worth hundreds of millions, sometimes billions of dollars each. The F-35 fighter jet program alone has cost over $1 trillion so far. For these companies, the Pentagon is their biggest customer, and as long as the defense budget stays high, their profits stay secure. Politicians also benefit. Defense contracts often mean jobs in their states or districts. A single weapons plant or military base can employ thousands of people, which gives politicians a strong reason to fight for funding. Supporting the defense budget is one of the easiest ways to stay popular with voters, especially in areas that rely on military jobs. It's a political safety net. No one wants to be the person who voted to close a base or cut a program that supports local workers. The military itself gains more power and resources. A bigger budget allows the Pentagon to fund advanced weapons, training, and operations around the world. For military leaders, this means staying ahead of rivals and maintaining the U.S.'s reputation as the strongest force on the planet. Every new technology or piece of equipment keeps America one step ahead of potential threats, but also keeps spending locked in place. Allies benefit too. Many countries rely heavily on U.S. military support. For example, NATO allies count on America's weapons, intelligence, and global reach to deter threats. Countries in Asia, Europe, and the Middle East benefit from U.S. protection without spending nearly as much themselves. This makes America's role in global security even harder to scale back. Even communities far from war zones feel the impact. Defense spending flows into local economies, creating jobs in manufacturing, engineering, research, and logistics. A company designing drones in California or a shipyard in Virginia both rely on Pentagon contracts. That money then spreads into housing, schools, and businesses in those communities. Of course, not everyone benefits equally. While defense companies, politicians, and certain regions thrive, ordinary taxpayers foot the bill. Billions that could go toward healthcare, education, or infrastructure are instead directed to the military. The benefits are concentrated, while the costs are spread across the entire population. This uneven balance creates a system where defense spending is politically untouchable. Too many powerful players depend on it. And this brings us to the next part of the story, the real cost of this spending for everyday Americans, the price that rarely makes headlines. Every year, the U.S. spends over $800 billion on its military. That number sounds distant, like something happening far away in Washington, but the truth is, every American pays for it, whether they realize it or not. The cost of endless defense spending shows up in ways that affect daily life, and not all of them are obvious. Let's start with taxes. A significant portion of what Americans pay in taxes goes straight to the Pentagon. That means less money is left for other priorities, like schools, healthcare, affordable housing, and infrastructure. Imagine if even a small fraction of that $800 billion went toward fixing roads, making college affordable, or lowering medical costs. Instead, year after year, the defense budget gets priority over almost everything else. Then there's the debt. America borrows heavily to fund its massive spending habits, and defense is a big part of that. Trillions of dollars have been spent on wars in Afghanistan and Iraq alone, much of it added to the national debt. That debt doesn't just sit there. It grows with interest, and future generations will be the ones to pay it back. Another hidden cost is opportunity. Economists often talk about opportunity cost, meaning what you lose by choosing one thing over another. When America chooses to spend more on weapons than on domestic programs, opportunities to invest in the future are lost. Other developed countries that spend less on their militaries often invest heavily in social programs, technology, and education. The U.S., despite its wealth, struggles in areas like healthcare access, public transportation, and even internet infrastructure. There's also a psychological cost. The U.S. has been involved in military conflicts for most of its modern history. Generations have grown up knowing nothing but war headlines, foreign interventions, and rising defense budgets. This creates a culture where military spending feels normal, even necessary. Over time, it becomes difficult to imagine a future where those billions are spent elsewhere. And for soldiers and veterans, the cost is deeply personal. The wars America fights often leave scars that money can't fix. Veterans come home with injuries, both visible and invisible, and the healthcare system struggles to support them fully. The enormous sums spent on war don't always translate into better care for those who fought it. Finally, the cost is global. America's military footprint affects other countries, shaping economies and politics around the world. While this gives the U.S. power, it also means resources that could solve problems at home are instead used to maintain global influence. When you add all of this up, the true cost of U.S. military spending is far greater than a number in a budget. It's a weight carried by every taxpayer, every family, and every future generation. And yet, even with these heavy costs, cutting back seems nearly impossible. The system has become so ingrained that questioning it feels like questioning national security itself. At this point, you might be wondering, can America ever slow down its military spending? The short answer is not easily. The U.S. defense budget isn't just a line in a spreadsheet. It's a deeply rooted system built over decades, and untangling it is like trying to stop a moving train. One major reason is fear of falling behind. For decades, U.S. leaders have worried about losing their edge over rivals. During the Cold War, it was the Soviet Union. Today, it's China, Russia, cyber attacks, terrorism, and even threats that haven't yet appeared. This fear is baked into policy decisions. Cutting the defense budget isn't just seen as risky. It's viewed by many as dangerous. Politicians know that if something goes wrong after they cut funding, they'll be blamed. So, they rarely take the risk. Another reason is politics. Defense spending is one of the few things that consistently gets support from both political parties. Republicans and Democrats may fight over taxes, healthcare, or education, but when it comes to funding the Pentagon, there's often little debate. That's because defense spending isn't just about national security, it's about jobs. Cutting a major weapons program doesn't just mean fewer tanks or planes. It means factories shutting down, workers losing jobs, and entire communities suffering. No politician wants that headline. Then there's the military-industrial complex itself, the powerful connection between the Pentagon, defense contractors, and lawmakers. Companies spend millions lobbying Congress to ensure budgets stay high. Retired generals and top officials often move into defense industry jobs, which keeps the cycle spinning. This influence makes major cuts nearly impossible. Global politics also plays a role. The U.S. isn't just defending itself. It's protecting its allies and maintaining influence worldwide. Bases in Asia, Europe, and the Middle East aren't cheap, but they're part of a strategy to deter rivals and keep trade routes safe. Pulling back from that role could create instability, and leaders are hesitant to take that gamble. Finally, there's the psychological side. The U.S. has built an identity around being a global superpower. Military strength is a huge part of that image. Cutting back spending isn't just a budget decision. It feels like a loss of status. And in a world where power often equals security, few leaders want to take that step. So, While it's technically possible to reduce defense spending, it would require a major shift in how America sees itself and its place in the world. That shift would take years, maybe decades. For now, the cycle continues. New threats, new weapons, new budgets. But this raises an even bigger question. If the U.S. can't stop spending, what does that mean for its future? Let's wrap up with a final look at this cycle, what it says about America, and what it could mean for generations to come. The story of U.S. military spending isn't just about numbers. It's about a mindset that has shaped the country for decades. Every dollar spent tells a story of fear, power, and influence. What started as a response to world wars and global threats has grown into a system so massive it feels impossible to change. Today, America spends more on its military than any other country, by a wide margin. This spending supports industries, creates jobs, and strengthens the U.S.'s position as a global superpower. But it also drains resources that could be used to solve problems at home, like crumbling infrastructure, healthcare shortages, and education gaps. For politicians, cutting defense budgets is a political risk. For companies, it's a financial risk. And for the country, it feels like a gamble with national security. These factors create a loop where spending only increases, no matter the circumstances. Even during times of peace, the defense budget rarely shrinks. What makes this cycle even harder to break is that much of this spending is invisible to the average person. We see new schools and roads when tax dollars are spent locally, but a jet fighter program worth billions? That's hidden in a warehouse or flying over foreign skies. It doesn't feel real. And because of that, it's easier to ignore. The question isn't just whether America can stop spending so much on war. It's whether it even wants to. Being the strongest military power in the world is part of America's identity. It's a source of pride, influence, and protection. But at what cost? That's the question every taxpayer should be asking. History shows that empires rise and fall, often because of how they choose to use their resources. The U.S. has built its influence through military power, but power alone doesn't guarantee stability. If the defense budget continues to grow while other parts of society weaken, America could face challenges at home that no amount of military strength can solve. The truth is, real change would require a complete rethinking of priorities. It would take courage from leaders to say, we need fewer weapons and more investment in our people. It would take voters demanding transparency about where their money goes. And it would take breaking a cycle that has been decades in the making. For now, the U.S. remains locked into its role as the world's military giant. That comes with advantages, but it also carries a heavy price. The next time you hear about the defense budget, remember it's not just a number. It's a reflection of values, history, and choices. Choices that will shape the future of every American. So what do you think? Is this spending keeping America safe? Or is it a sign that the country has forgotten how to stop? If this video gave you a new perspective on why America can't stop spending on war, hit that like button. It helps more people discover this story. Don't forget to subscribe for more deep dives into history, politics, and the stories shaping our world today. And I'd love to hear your thoughts. Do you think this spending is keeping us safe or holding us back? Drop your opinion in the comments, because your voice matters here. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.